In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. It's a pleasure to be with you here yet again, week after week. Summer is in full swing, of course. It's very nice. I enjoy the warm season and baseball. The Chicago Cubs, my favorite team. They're doing well atop the NL Central. The school year is just around the corner, believe it or not. For many of us are adults, it seems like summer is so short. When we were kids, though, summer took forever, and it was awesome playing backyard baseball. That's how I spent most of my summers. How about you, Chris? Video gaming, probably.
No, I was outside. A lot of pool.
Pool?
Time.
All right.
Yeah.
And Mark Lester joining us here in studio. Mark, how'd you spend most of your childhood in the summers?
There's actually a video game called Backyard Baseball that I played.
You played a video game called Backyard Baseball.
It was really legit.
So you played the video game, not the actual thing.
I was better at that than the actual one.
Hilarious. Well, with summer coming to an end here in what will feel like no time, the school year around the corner, we wanted to devote an episode here to training your kids for spiritual war. Some of us have different philosophies about how to do this, and some of us homeschool, send our kids to private schools, maybe a private Christian school, or have our kids go into Rome itself, the public school system. No, there are differing philosophies on how we should raise our kids and how we should train them to be prepared to give an answer for the hope that they have. And so joining me on the program today is someone who speaks frequently to young people. He's a dynamic speaker and provides a perfect blend of expertise with some humor as well. He is none other than Tim Barnett of Stand to Reason. Tim, thanks so much for joining us on our program today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kurt. And just for the record, I used to play baseball too. And I don't know
they play baseball in Canada, huh?
We do. You know, in 1992, 93, those were big years for the Toronto Blue Jays,
yes.
Back-to-back World Series. And so, man, at that time in my life, I don't know how old I was at the time, probably 9, 10, I wanted to become a professional baseball player. You know, watching Roberto Alomar and Joe Carter and, I don't know, all these guys. And now I don't follow it too much. The Jays I don't think they're doing too well this year.
No, yeah. Not right now. Let me ask you, so are you born and raised in Toronto?
Yeah, just north of Toronto. So I'm Canadian, born and raised.
I figured everyone up there just, plays hockey all the time.
Yeah, I know. I did play hockey as well, but and
people don't realize, they think like Toronto is like, for folks unfamiliar with a map, they think Toronto's like way up there, and actually if you look at it, it's like, Detroit, Chicago level.
That's right.
It's
right.
Not that bad.
So
Winnipeg is a place I would never ever want to live.
Yeah, my wife has some relatives in Winnipeg, and that is where, it goes 40 below.
Yeah.
And that's, during the summertime. That's their winter, and even the summer is pretty bad. So, yeah, it's not one of the places anyone really wants to live.
It's you and I have worked in the apologetics field for many years, and I'm glad we could finally connect and have you come on the program. It's great, sort of the rapport that folks in our community can build. And so I solicited some questions from some of my followers online, and here's one from Slan Alayman. He asks, ask Tim why he doesn't grow hair over his whole head anymore.
Yeah, that's a genetic thing. If you saw my dad, you would know exactly why I shave my head like I do. For some reason, man, by 25 years old, if you saw my wedding pictures, full head of hair, okay? 25. Now I'm 36. And so it started right after those marriage days. I'm not saying causation. I think there's probably some correlated things going on there, but yeah, that's.
For me, it was about my mid-20s as well, and I'm not quite to the point you're at, though. You probably take a razor to it, huh?
You know what? Not yet. I'm still using the clippers, but just basically, I'm going right down to the hardwood. With it, there's no settings on there.
Yeah.
So, but one day, I'm sure I'll get the razor out.
Yeah, nice. Good. All right. Oh, of course, that was not Slan, but Alan, one of your colleagues at Stand to Reason.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So more seriously, we want to talk about and look at some issues for training our kids for spiritual warfare, looking at reasons why people are leaving the church. I mean, even Christian parents might think that they're raising their kids well, and lo and behold, their kid's in high school, and maybe their kid's not talking to them about doubts and questions that they have. And there are some reasons. There was a Barna study that came out a few years ago, which really shed a lot of light about why young people are leaving the church.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit about that Barna study.
Sure. This was done, I think not quite a decade ago. I think 2011 is when they published the study. And actually it was put into a book called You Lost Me. And what's really interesting about that book is they didn't just look at when young people are leaving the church, walking away from their faith. The buzzwords are disconnecting or disengaging from the church. That's how they describe it. We used to think it was like college years. Okay. So it's because those students went to college or university, they met those professors, and that's why they left. Well, what's cool about this study was it said, no, it's actually happening by the age of, in 15 years old. So we're talking, grade 9, grade 10. And so this was important in that respect, but it was also important because David Kinnaman found, he's the president of the Barna Group, he found that there were 6 kind of main reasons why young people walk away. And what's interesting is in 2012, Christianity Today, they took those 6 reasons and they basically summarized them in a single word, okay? And the words were isolationism, shallowness, anti-science, sex, exclusivity, and then doubters. Okay, so those were the 6 words. Those were the 6 top reasons why these young people were walking away from their faith. And what I noticed was when I saw this list, and it was just a couple years ago when I was reading about this, I said, you know what? All of these issues, to some degree or another, are related to what we do as apologists. They have an apologetic response. I mean, some more than others. But the second thing, so that was the first thing. It's like we address these issues. The second thing was we've been addressing them for years. Like I've been with Stand to Reason for about 5 years. Okay, but these issues they've been tackling for like 25 years. Okay, and so this isn't new stuff. And so I'm a little scratching my head as I read through this research. Why is it these are so powerful, these arguments or these reasons, when we have addressed these for decades? And of course the answer is, okay, we've been addressing them, but the church at large isn't even familiar with what we're doing. And so this is why I think it's so important that we get apologetics out to the church en masse. We need to get this stuff out there. It's not that we don't have the answers, that most people don't even realize we have answers.
Yeah, J. Warner Wallace has said that we don't need more $1 million apologists, but we need more $1 apologists in the church. And so that
he's right.
So that would be the way to do it, is by getting more $1 or $2, or I joke that I'm a $10 apologist. More in the church. Then our churches will be better. We'll be better equipped, better prepared to help address these 6 issues. So I'm wondering if we're able to look at these 6 issues, Tim, more closely, so that we ourselves can be better prepared to identify these areas and be more prepared to bring this to our own church. So let's start. The first one was isolationism.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this one, isolationism, is that Stand to Reason for years has a phrase that we don't isolate young people, we inoculate young people. And I don't know if Greg Koukl coined that phrase or if it was Brett Kunkel. Certainly, I didn't invent this, but I think it's true. We don't want to be isolating, because oftentimes the church and Christian schools, you mentioned this, homeschool groups, we become like little islands that are disconnected from the rest of the world, okay? And so the idea is, let's keep our kids, I think it's right-hearted but wrong-headed. We think, you know what, we need to keep our kids away from that evolution stuff, so don't even talk about it. We need to keep our kids away from these false religions, don't tell them about Islam. Don't tell them, that kind of thing. Oh, keep our kids away from things like, don't even mention pornography. This is interesting because I'm doing some research right now. I'm putting together a talk on the effects of pornography. And I think the church, when it comes to sex issues, it's like, we don't talk about them. I don't even remember having a sex talk with my parents. Okay, I grew up in the church, and it was like, Tim, you got to figure this out on your own kind of thing. Yeah. This is the wrong approach, okay? Your kids are going to stumble across this stuff. In fact, the best research we have says that by age 13, something like close to 15% or 50% of young people, especially young boys, are already looking at pornography, okay? And they stumbled upon it mostly accidentally by the age of 10. So we need to have this conversation early. I just wrote a blog post about this book, this kid's book. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. Okay, it's for ages 3 to 7. And basically it goes through and talks about how there's bad pictures out there. There's good pictures. Here's some good ones. Here's some good ones. Yeah. And there's also bad ones, like pictures of naked, they describe it as seeing body parts, private parts. Private parts should remain private, this kind of thing. Yeah. So you can talk to your kids about this, and when they see it, don't shame them. Tell them that the idea in this book was, as soon as you see it, you're going to run. That's the first thing. And you're going to tell, okay? So you're going to tell your parents what you've seen, and then of course the parents can respond accordingly. So that's that's one example of, instead of isolating, inoculating. Because how an inoculation works, or it's supposed to work, is you get the flu shot. So you get part of the flu virus. Your body builds up immunity. It now recognizes what that is. So the next time I'm exposed to that flu, hopefully my body's ready to fight against it. And so I don't get the symptoms. And so we need to be having conversations with our young people about things like relativism. They're swimming in that, it's like a fish not knowing they're wet. Okay, kids, your kids, if you're listening to me out there, your kids are influenced by relativism. And I know that because I do a truth test all in North America. Come to the US, come to Canada, and I do this thing called the truth test. And I ask kids, whether something is the kind of truth that's like ice cream, personal preference, or insulin. Like, if you have type 1 diabetes, you need insulin, that kind of thing. And I'll ask them about questions like, Coke tastes better than Pepsi. They'll say, well, Coke tastes, that's an ice cream claim. That's personal preference. Some people like Pepsi. Then I'll say something like,
the real answer there is Dr. Pepper, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Neither of those are correct. You're right. When it comes to Coke Zero has fewer calories than Coke. Well, obviously that's insulin. But then when I get to questions like this, I ask, abortion is wrong. All of a sudden, everyone in the room says, well, that's ice cream. That's personal preference. And this tells me right away, because now that's a moral claim, right? Yeah. It's not a question about science or history or math. This is a question about morality. And our kids are so influenced by the music they listen to, by the TV shows they watch, by the movies they watch. Virtually everything is telling them that moral relativism is true. And so so they just buy into it. When you say Jesus is the only way, well, that's just personal preference, right? No, that's not ice cream. That's insulin. We're going to come back to that. That's the fourth thing on the list, or the fifth thing on the list. So we need to be telling our kids, our students, about relativism. So when they can see it all over the place. When they're watching a movie, they can, that's relativism. Religious pluralism. All roads lead to God. All of them are equally valid. No, that's not true. And we can show that that's not true. But you got to identify it before you can respond to it. And we could just go down the list. Material, like naturalism, all these isms that are out there. So at Standard Reason, for years, we've been telling parents, please stop isolating your kids and start inoculating them, and they'll be better off for it.
So
right?
While there is maybe this tendency for parents to want to isolate, I mentioned there are different philosophies, educational philosophies out there.
Yeah.
You could even still think that you want to homeschool, but don't homeschool because you want to isolate. Homeschool because you want to inoculate.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, when you isolate, you're not really preparing them. You're just prohibiting them as long as you physically can from certain experiences or learning about, gaining exposure to ideas out there.
That's right. So you're right. So a homeschool parent. So I'm not talking about physical isolation, because homeschool you're kind of.
Well, that does happen too sometimes.
Sure, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But you can physically isolate. Look, I'm in Toronto, and if I told you some of the things that are being taught in the public school system, it should.
There are
cause
some
us
places.
all to,
there are some places in the States where it's exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I think California is very similar. Our sex ed curriculum, if you read through it, you would think, oh, this must be for like an 18-year-old. No, this is what they're learning in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. So we personally send our kids to a classical Christian school. If I wasn't traveling around, all over the place, I would homeschool my own kids. Yeah. But that just isn't an option for us because of the work we're doing.
Yep.
So for us though, it's not just we don't want to isolate them when it comes to ideas. And when Jesus said to be in the world but not of the world, he wasn't speaking about us all floating around in these bubbles away from everyone. He was talking about the inoculation idea that we're in the world, right? We're interacting with people just like Jesus did, but we're not of it. We haven't bought into their philosophies. In fact, Colossians 2:8, says that we are, I got my Bible over here. See to it that no one takes you captive, right? To like empty philosophy that's according to the human tradition, this kind of idea. So he's not condemning philosophy outright. He's talking about bad philosophy. C.S. Lewis said something like, good philosophy must exist if for no other reason to answer bad philosophy. And I think Paul's got this idea in mind. There's tons of bad philosophies out there. And sadly, most parents don't even know about it. They don't know what relativism is. They don't know what religious pluralism is. They don't know what naturalism is. And as a result, their kids don't. And now we're seeing these consequences. And so their kid discovers relativism or naturalism or evolution or whatever for the first time.
Yep.
And they're like, wow, this is unreal. I never heard of this before. This must be true, right? And oh, by the way, my parents don't believe this. So that's just one more reason, right? Because, my parents are ignorant. Every child thinks that, at least for a season. And then they grow up and then they realize, when I was 18, I thought my parents were, idiots. And then I realized by 25 that they're brilliant, that kind of thing. And of course, my parents didn't change, but I grew up.
My sweet firstborn, she's 5, and to see, and it's so funny because you see her, she thinks she's trying to get away with something, and you see it happen. And then I have the thought, oh, when I was 5, I tried to do the same thing,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's you gotta watch out, eh? Like I have 3 little girls, and they're like little parrots. They do everything and say everything that you do. And so I'll catch them. It's like, where did you learn? Oh, that's what I do, right? And it can be actually quite convicting.
Yeah. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's, there are things to work on.
That's right. And so practically speaking, and if parents are listening, it's like, okay, what do I do? Well, you need to start educating yourself on some of these things and teach them. Just at the dinner table. Virtually every dinner, we have some kind of meaningful conversation with our girls, and they're registering it. We were talking about the Trinity the other day, and my girls are at day camp. They're there right now, and one of the leaders sent me a text message saying, your daughter was eating these popcorners. You know what a popcorner is? It's like popcorn, but it's in the shape of a chip that looks like a triangle. Okay. I don't know if you guys have those in it might be a Canadian thing. Okay. Yeah. So it's like they mashed up popcorn into the shape of a triangle. Okay. Okay. And put cheese on it, and it's like a chip. Yeah. She's holding this thing in the shape of a triangle, and she's explaining to her friends. She's 7. Okay. This is just like God. And she's like, the corners, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but one chip, one popcorner. And it's like, I realize that that's probably even a heretical teaching.
Yeah, we're St. Patrick and his bad analogies.
Yeah, that's right. But the point is, our kids, they take in this stuff. Yeah. I didn't know whether it was dropping into the meter, so to speak, and turns out it is. And so we need to be using that time, that meaningful time together, to train up our kids by exposing them to these ideas. And it may mean role playing. Sometimes I'm at the dinner table, I'm like, okay, kids, I want to pretend like I'm an atheist. You guys know what an atheist is? No, what's an atheist? An atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God. And they're like shocked. People don't believe in God, right? Because they're in this environment. They go to school, Christian school, church. This is their life. There's people that don't believe in God. And then I say, well, why do you guys believe in God? I'm an atheist. Show me that there's a God. And there's like, our daddy believes in God. Okay, my daddy doesn't. So, and then we're talking this out. And all of a sudden they're giving me arguments from design and the creation. And it's like, okay, you guys are getting this. Like, you guys are future. Yeah. You're little apologists here. So that's the idea I'm talking about, exposing them.
What would you say? So here, I might think someone might be listening to this and they might say, oh, well, man, Tim is just brainwashing his kids. What's the difference between training kids, preparing them, and sort of just drilling in? I don't know if you're familiar with this. There was a story that came out like 5 or 6 years ago of the daughter of a popular apologist, and she basically put out her story, and it's like, man, she was just drilled with doctrine, and it sounded like she just wanted a hug. Right. So what's the difference here then between training and preparing kids, and just going overboard with?
So I think that we have fun too, and it's not all about doctrine. And
right, of course,
smothering these guys with. Yeah. If you saw them cover me with kisses, you'd be like, okay, it's not like that kind of. Like I'm running a boot camp over here. No, this is like we're just we're sitting down for dinner. It doesn't always go smoothly, by the way, either. Think, oh wow, Tim, you got it all figured out. No, like food sometimes is flying. Okay, so we need to be careful though. Here's the difference. It's not brainwashing. Brainwashing gives one side and says, believe this because I told you so. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm actually exposing them to ideas. How many 7-year-olds do you know that are hearing arguments for atheism, arguments for Christianity, arguments for Islam? When my Jehovah's Witness friends come, I'm pointing to my front door over here, I spend a lot of time over there. I invite them in. Sometimes they come over for 2 hours. My kids sit down and listen, and they get to know them. By the way, it's not like they're just sitting there like robots. Like my kids hug my Jehovah's Witness friends when they come to the door, okay? Like there's this kind of thing happening. And so when people say you're just brainwashing, they have no idea what they're talking about, okay? This is the exact opposite of what brainwashing looks like. And when it comes time, my kids are going to be reading Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion, for themselves. Yeah. They're going to be reading these people for themselves. That's not brainwashing. Brainwashing is the idea of isolating, not inoculating. And so my kids will know Darwinism better than their classmates. They're going to know what the Muslim believes. They're going to know what these other religions believe. And so
and it's just preparing young people to be critical thinkers, to understand the big ideas, and that's there's merit in that, of course, and it's not like there's no party here that's totally objective in when there are accusations levied like that. Well, guess what? That happens on the other sides too. You think you're training kids to be atheists. No, well, I mean, we might say, well, that's not training. You're just brainwashing them either. So that sort of accusation can be lobbied the other way too. So it's not a very helpful criticism. So
Richard Dawkins right now is coming out with a God delusion for kids and a God delusion for teenagers. Okay, he's working on that. And so there will be atheists who read those books to their kids. Yep. And by the way, I'm buying those books and reading them to my kids. Okay. Yep. So it just I think it depends on your approach, whether you can label this as brainwashing. But certainly the way I'm doing it doesn't resemble brainwashing at all.
Yep. All right. We've got a few minutes before we need to take a break. Let's start, though, on the second point. We've spent all this time just touching on...
I know. That was a big one, though. That was a big one.
It is a big one.
Some of these other ones.
So what does it mean? I've written in my note here, shallow. People left because of shallowness?
Yeah, so what the study said was that they found church boring. They said faith is irrelevant and Bible teaching is unclear, okay? And what I think's going on here... Because I'm preaching to the choir here. Okay, you're working on your PhD in. Can I say what it is in? Or people?
Yeah.
Okay. So in original sin, and we were just talking before the show, and I'm reading a book that we both seem to be on the same page with. This is heavy doctrine stuff. Okay, now when I talk to kids about doctrine, they get excited. And I think it has to do with the way we approach it as well. We're not just reading like here's what this old scholar says, this dead scholar says, but with the way we present it. But it turns out theology is not shallow. It is so deep, it is so rich, and our kids are starving for it. Like they're hungry for it. You want to know why? Because when you consider a typical Friday night or Wednesday night youth meeting, you know what's going on there? Usually pizza parties, laser tag, we're playing volleyball. I mean, I'm describing my own upbringing, okay? I was in church whenever the doors were open. Mom was in the choir, all that stuff. We went to youth and Sunday school and we did it all. And I didn't know anything. By the time I was 18, you asked me what the Trinity is, I would have said, I don't know. Incarnation, what's that mean? You know what I'm saying? Like these words, I had no clue. And yet I was born basically in a pew, okay? And not literally. Some people are going to think that's not sanitary. No, I was born in a hospital. Okay, we do that in Canada.
I was going to say I've heard of home births, but I'm not sure I've heard of church births.
Yeah. But you get the idea. That's what we did. And if someone might break out the daily bread, you know what I'm talking about, the little daily bread, devotional.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do the gym night, and then, okay, everyone take a break. Let's get a water break. Okay, I'm going to read this. Everyone listen. Okay, let's get back to it. That kind of thing. And that's as deep and heavy as it went.
Yeah.
And so I think that's happening. And it's been my anecdotal kind of seeing what's going on. It was my experience. And our kids deserve more. They can handle more. When I go and speak at churches, I use the same presentation that I use with the adults, okay? And I'm speaking to junior hires. I'm speaking to high schoolers. And let me tell you something. No offense to parents listening, but your kids get it better than you do, okay? And I think that's because they're in the mode. Like they've been to school. Most of us have been out of school for a while, okay? And so we're not used to taking in lots of information in the course of a day. Well, these kids, they can handle it. And so one thing I say is Greg Kokel, he says, stop saying put the cookies on the bottom shelf, okay? Because some cookies cannot go on the bottom shelf. There are some things like the Trinity, it ain't going on the bottom shelf.
Yeah,
but here's
true.
He says this: we throw the ball so that you can catch it. And if you miss it, maybe it hits the guy behind you, okay? And so some things like the Trinity, we're going to throw it, and you may have to dive for it, okay? It may not be easy. You may have to jump for it. But but some kids are going to be able to jump for it.
Yeah.
And let's make them work. And I think we'll be surprised at what our kids can handle. And so let's start talking about the hypostatic union, and let's start bringing serious theology. And because some of the best conversations I had were, in my early 20s when I discovered apologetics and theology and all this stuff. And these were the deep, meaningful conversations that I'll always remember. Not like, what was going on with the baseball team. We both like baseball, but these are superficial compared to the big questions about why are we here? Where did we come from? Whether there's a moral law or not. These kinds of, whether God exists or not. Even like my atheist friends, acknowledge these are big, heavy questions, and they're fun to talk about. Yeah. Right?
I was going to say the shallowness critique here is related to many of these other points that we'll get into. When there's that shallow experience, you're not talking about the deep questions, like whether, the relationship between science and faith, what's a, Christian sexual ethics and having that clearly explained and defended. So the shallowness here relates to these other issues, which we've got to take a break now here, sure. Tim. When we come back, though, we'll keep talking about these issues for why folks are leaving the church and what we can do instead to help prepare kids for the spiritual war that's upon them. So stick with us through this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Let's say there's this Christian apologist. You love their message, but have trouble finding their videos, their articles, or social media posts. How do you stay connected to them? We're on it. Defenders Media uses the tools of the digital age to create content for your favorite apologists. We give them more screen time, more digital soapboxes, and more presence to deliver more of the content that you love. That's what we do.
I know that social media is important to those of you who follow my work. Many respond to my videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter, but it becomes impossible after a while to keep up with it all and to continue with research. That's why I'm thrilled that we have found a solution, Defenders Media.
Whether it's a website, whether it's printed material, whether it's a question on graphics, I cannot do what I do and reach my audience without the help of Defenders Media. They have been integral in helping me to reach my audience.
Defenders Media ensures consistent content reaches your hand from today's leading apologists and apologetic ministries, like Mike Lycona, Apologetics 315, the Veracity Hill podcast with Kurt Jarris, and more.
To learn more, text the word Defenders to 555-888, and we'll send you a free PDF of the top 5 ways to share the gospel online. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. If you'd like to learn how you can become a sponsor, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com, where you can click on our Patron tab, and you can learn more about sponsorship and other things there about how you can chip in each month to support our program. So we are grateful for our folks there. You can see the camera just panning. Somehow during the break it got misaligned. On today's episode, we're talking about how we can prepare young people for spiritual war, and we are joined by Tim Barnett of Stand to Reason. He frequently speaks in front of young audiences, and as we've learned here, the content doesn't change. He's got the same material for the young folks as for the older folks, and the young folks understand it. They get it better because they are in the midst. They're swimming in an ocean of awful ideas from society, whereas adults have maybe isolated themselves more in the communities of folks that think more like them. So, Tim, thanks again for joining us on our program. Now, I did not tell you about this, but every episode we do a segment called Rapid Questions, where we ask just short questions, totally off topic, random. We get to know a little bit more about you. So if you are ready, I will start the game clock and we'll be on our way.
Let's do it.
Taco Bell or KFC?
KFC. Although I'm cringing.
What's your favorite sport?
Hockey.
What's your most hated sports franchise?
I don't have one.
Did you have a dream last night?
No.
Do you drink Dr. Pepper?
Sometimes.
What music do you like to listen to?
Hip hop.
Pick a fictional character that you'd like to meet.
Iron Man.
How many keys are on your key ring?
1.
Is there anything going on this weekend?
Yes.
Do you have any pets?
No.
If you wanted to grab dinner with someone you disagree on, who would it be?
Disagree with?
Yeah.
Let's go with sure, Richard Dawkins. We were just talking about it.
He is like one of the most popular. I should just get rid of that question from.
Maybe you should just add the caveat, not Richard Dawkins.
Not Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
He's a frequent. Give us someone else.
Okay, not Richard Dawkins. Disagree with.
Yeah.
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris. Okay. Nice.
Interesting guy. Or you know what, Ben Shapiro. When it comes to things of Judaism versus Christianity, that would be a fun discussion.
N.T. Wright's answer when we asked him this question: Jordan Peterson.
Oh, that would be and he's a local guy. He's from University of Toronto.
Yeah. I wonder if you could email him at his faculty profile and say, "Hey, you want to get lunch sometime?" He's probably way too popular to.
He probably, but you never know. I've heard stories, people who have met him, and he's been really down to earth and willing to, go on their podcast or whatever, really open to it. Yeah. You should have him. You should send him a message.
I'll be honest. Sent him a message through his website like a year or two ago.
No response?
No response. Yep.
Okay.
I'm stuck with guys like Tim Barnett,
I know. Meanwhile, I'm emailing you. You got to have me on your show.
Okay, so let's see. We had 6 points from Barna, and in the first half of the program, we spent most of the time talking about this isolationism, and you sort of responded with that to hold to an inoculation philosophy.
Yeah.
And then we also covered sort of the shallowness that some people have in their experience of doing church.
Yeah.
And these 4 other ones, I take it, are really up there on the apologetic world. So the first 2 kind of like deal with experience and maybe a philosophy of doing church or those sorts of things. Which I don't know if our guests could hear Mark. Mark was just running around there and something was jingling in his pockets. Did you get what you needed, Mark? Yeah.
I thought it was Santa.
Yeah.
So much for subtlety.
All right, so Tim, the next one, anti-science. This is one of the reasons why young folks have left the church. Tell me about that, and what can we do instead to prepare our kids?
Well, the church, I think, needs to, and parents need to start talking about scientific issues. I'm trying to raise, 3 little scientists myself, and so we watch things like Life, and on Netflix they have these kind of documentary style.
You've got a bachelor's degree in a scientific field, so you're just kind of oriented that way.
And I love science. My bachelor's degree was in physics and minored in math, and then I was a science teacher for a little while, teaching both in the private system and also in the public system here. So, I mean, I love science. We need to teach our kids that science and faith and Christianity are compatible. In fact, I taught on this just yesterday morning. And people are always surprised by that, like, because there's this notion, again, and I think it has to do with isolationism, that you don't go into, if you're a Christian, you don't go into sciences, and science is where, the devil's at work, this kind of thing. And I think
apparently God didn't create the world and we can't learn about it.
Yeah, that's right. It's almost like the heavens declare the glory of God. And it's like, Romans 1, that God's invisible attributes are put on display. They're clearly seen, is what he says, being understood from what has been made, so that we are without excuse. And so there's these texts that are so obvious that when we do science, we should see God's handiwork. And things like the guys who in the science textbook, like Isaac Newton, I mean, the guys that have units named after them, Galileo and James Clerk Maxwell and so on. These guys were men of faith, okay? And God was not a hindrance to science. He was the inspiration for their science, okay? And to me, I went through the public system myself, okay, education system, and I didn't know any of that. No one told me that. You just learned about these equations and how to use them, and that was it. So we do our kids a disservice when we don't talk about science. Now, I think part of the problem is too that there are certain creation ministries that make it seem like there's one view, and if you don't hold that view, then guess what? You're not a Christian.
Then you deny inerrancy.
Or you do not. That's right. I mean, I was the victim of that. And again, I'm not trying to play the victim here, but I was targeted recently with a blog post, and I'm using my words carefully because I think it was kind of a hit thing. And they said I am trying to compromise the faith of our young students and distorting the gospel. Those are exact quotes. Yeah. So here we have, and by the way, I don't take a position on the age of the earth. So that was my issue. The fact that I don't take a position one way or the other. I'm quite happy to say it's young. I mean, if someone said it's 6,000 years, if we fine, okay, no problem. If it's 13.7 billion for the universe and 4.5 for the earth, great. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't bother me either way. And so when people ask me, how old's the earth? And I say, I'm not young earth, I'm not old earth, I'm middle earth, okay?
Cheesy Tolkien joke there.
Yeah,
Chris is applauding you, so is Mark.
Yeah, there you go. Because, I mean, the reality is the issue is whether God's the creator. And when I'm talking with atheists, that's the issue. I'm not trying to argue carbon dating with an atheist, okay? Yeah. Because even if they believed in a young earth, it still doesn't save them, okay? Yeah. Faith in Christ saves them. So getting them to God is my primary strategy, my primary goal. So anyways, the problem is, it's like, look, you deny this interpretation, and I used to be a hardcore young earth creationist. It was actually the first apologist I discovered was the young earthers, okay? And so I'm sympathetic. If you saw my bookshelves, which you can't from here, you'd see resources from them. I read the stuff, and so I'm sympathetic because I used to be there. But when you're teaching this way, here's the view of creation, and you put a line through it. And then after you put a line through that, on the next slide, you show virgin birth, line through that, the resurrection, line through that. Because you've denied this thing, this interpretation, you now have to deny all these fundamental beliefs of Christianity. God's existence, get rid of that. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't follow. But that's how you're teaching people. So here's the thing. My advice to parents, teach them the view that you hold of creation, okay? But teach the other views as well, so they understand, and make sure they understand that God reveals himself in two ways, and that this battle between between Christians is an in-house discussion, and it has nothing to do with salvation. Because as soon as you say this is the view, and if you deny it, well, then you're denying God and everything else. It's no surprise that some of those people grow up, and you mentioned a girl who grew up with an apologist house, and if you read her testimony, you get this idea that wait a second, if this isn't true, then I throw the whole thing out. Like, get rid of my whole Bible because I'm changing, because I don't hold this interpretation in Genesis in these like 2 pages. Okay. That's not how hermeneutics works. Okay. That's not how it doesn't follow.
Yep.
So science, really important. And we could spend a lot of time. I mean, people do their homework on men like, Gregor Mendel, or, some of these really big names in the science world, who, father of genetics, or Francis Bacon, the father of modern science. What they find out is these guys didn't see a problem with their science and their faith. They came together quite nicely.
Yep.
So we got to keep all that in mind.
Yep. I want to keep moving along in the interest of time to the next point. So it's on sex. And before we talk about that, we had a question from Mariah. She writes in, I've always wanted to ask Tim or any of the STR people, how do we know when to talk to our kids about the many social issues of today that are sexually and inappropriate for the really young?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And the answer is it depends on your kid. Some kids can handle those conversations earlier than others. Okay. So I would, and it also depends on what's going on. Look, I don't want to talk to my kids about the transgender issue. Okay. I really don't. Not right now. They're 3, 6, and 7. Here's the problem though. It's all over the place. And not only that, it's in my own family. Okay. So we have a relative who is in her early 20s, and she is transitioned. First, she was gender neutral, and now she identifies as a man, okay, and has changed her name. And so my daughter's actually in Winnipeg, and I'm speaking, I'm in the States, and it turns out that she was in the basement. All the kids were down there, and my daughter is talking with Rook, and Rook is talking with them, and she says, "You sound like a girl," but she looks like a boy. Actually, she's even had her breasts removed. Okay, so she says, "No, well, I was born a girl, but I identify as a man." And my daughter said, "Well, God made you a girl, so you're a girl." Okay, now I didn't know anything about this until Rook sends my wife a text message. Okay. And says, "I hope that I just want you to know I had a discussion with your daughters about my gender." And of course, my jaw's on the ground right now.
Yeah, and again, I don't know what her relation is,
sure,
but it's like that's not the way you want it to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And so of course we're like thinking, okay, what happened? She explains what happened. Is the first we're hearing about it, and she's like, "You need to teach your kid that this is my gender, and this is like, you need to teach your kids this stuff, this kind of thing." And it was kind of like, we responded very carefully.
Yeah.
With all due respect, we disagree with your view on this issue, and of course we love you, and just as you disagree with us on our view,
yep,
and you can still love us. So we're kind of walking through this. So my whole point is, though, now we have to have a conversation. We had to have a conversation with my daughter about this whole situation. Not just leave it in the dark. Again, we're trying to inoculate. And so we're not going to ignore everything. Just like, let's pretend like that interaction didn't happen. No, we can't do that now.
Yeah.
And so to answer the question, it depends on the kid. It depends on their situation. For us, this happened earlier than we wanted to. But now I have to have a conversation with my 7-year-old. I got to have a conversation with my 6-year-old. You know what? My 3-year-old didn't know what was going on. Okay, she just, to be honest, that's where she's at.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
The whole conversation wasn't happening. So
yeah, I've got a 3-year-old, so I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So we say stuff around her all the time, and things are just not registering. Although some stuff is.
Yep.
And but she's so that's kind of the short answer to that. I know we got to keep moving, but the questions about sexuality are some of the biggest hurdles for young people right now. Okay, they think the Christian view is a repressive. Okay,
yeah,
it's archaic. It's and yet of course transgenderism and even homosexuality, like homosexual marriage, these kinds of things, this is relatively new stuff on the radar.
Yep.
Of course, homosexuality has been around for, of course, a long time. But I'm talking about the way it's being pushed in the culture so that we have to deal with these things. It's at a different level.
Yep.
It's being promoted in our education system, okay? We have Pride Month, as you guys do too, in June. In Toronto, we had the World Pride Parade a couple years ago with millions of people, okay? And so this is the kind of thing that we need to be having these conversations earlier and earlier, so that our kids know what's going on and can think through these issues for themselves.
And it's almost as if the church just started talking about human sexuality, that's going to be an improvement upon.
That's right.
It's like, say, you don't have to work that hard. Just start talking about what our view is and explaining it, and that's going to be better than what has happened the past 40 years.
And start talking just about sex in general, because. Look at Alan Schleman. If you go to Stand to Reason, str.org, he wrote an article called "Is God a Sex Killjoy?" And if you walked into most churches, you would think he is. Like Christians who are married, you better not be having sex. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, we should be having the best sex. And actually, some of the research
studies show that. Yes, that's right.
We are having the best sex. I mean, I can speak from experience. And
yeah, right.
Okay? So hopefully, my wife doesn't. No. Here's the thing. We should be taught God designed it, okay? And yet we act like...
I wish we had a camera on Chris, because his look just now...
His jaw is on the ground right now. She's in the house. She's upstairs, so she probably heard me say
Tim,
that.
I think the doghouse is in the backyard.
Yeah. No, she knows, and of course, Christians know that God designed this thing this way. It's not something we need to be ashamed of, and yet most kids... they think that it's a shameful thing. And look I'm a part-time married pastor at my own church.
You're part-time married? Or wait.
Married director. I'm married full-time, but I'm the married pastor because I have a full-time thing with Stand to Reason. I can only, do part-time.
I'm just playing with you.
I know you are. I'm just making sure that everyone else knows that too. And so, but what we've discovered is there are people who end up getting married and they have trouble having sex with their spouse because they grew up in the church and they have this idea that sex is this dirty thing, okay? And that maybe we shouldn't be doing it. And they feel ashamed. I've seen marriages end in divorce because of this kind of thing, okay? So this is not just a homosexuality, transgender issue thing. This is just broadly speaking, we need to do better when it comes to sex. And here's the thing. Hopefully, can you hear my daughter right now?
It's the cutest thing. No worries.
Okay. I just want to make sure that she doesn't walk in on us here. So we need to do better. And I'm not here, and this is the thing I want to say. I'm not trying to beat up on the bride. Like I said, I'm a part-time pastor. I have no animosity for the church. I love the church, okay? I want to see what's best for the church, and that's why we're making these criticisms, right? All right, what about the next one?
All right, so we've got exclusivity.
So this is, I think exclusivity has been a problem since Christ, okay? Since 2,000 years ago. This was an issue that, you talked about schools being like Rome. Yeah. Of course, the idea that there's one way and that's the only way. It's to our culture. It's intolerant. It's narrow-minded. It's even bigoted. It's arrogant. You have all these terms that get thrown around as soon as you start saying, "Well, Jesus is the only way." Here's my advice to parents: teach your kids explicitly what the gospel is, and what you find is the idea that our message is exclusive starts to make sense. Because Jesus is the only one who claimed to come and die for sin, and the sin problem that we all have. And so you need to make it clear that we all have this problem, and here's the solution, okay? The other religions don't even make the claim to have. There's no guru, there's no prophet, there's no that claims to have done what Jesus has done. And so what I do when I teach on Jesus being the only way is I start with, Kate, I want you to hear the gospel for the first, like you've heard it for the first time, okay? Because for many of you, maybe it is the first time you've actually heard it, okay? Even if you've grown up in the church. And so I find that once you understand our need and the solution, you see, oh yeah, this is why Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And by the way, that's Jesus. That's not Tim. Okay? Don't call me arrogant. You're calling Jesus arrogant because he's the one who said it. And most people think Jesus has more credibility, right? I certainly think he's got more credibility than me or you or any other living, philosopher or theologian. And so when Greg Koukl debated Deepak Chopra, this famous New Age guru, sold millions of copies, and they talked about this issue. Greg was very strategic in how he talked about this. He didn't say, here's what Greg says. He said, here's what Jesus taught. Okay? So it's Jesus versus Deepak. And all of a sudden, now it's like, oh, wait a second. I don't want to go toe to toe with Jesus. Nobody does. Okay? No one wants to say Jesus is wrong on this. They're happy to say Greg Koukl's wrong or Tim Barnett's wrong or, but so that's where I would go with the exclusivity thing.
And I would say you kind of already expose, you were mentioning some of the mental exercises or games you were doing about vanilla and chocolate ice cream and then abortion. You're already exposing them to the concept of truth because truth itself is exclusive.
That's right.
And so interestingly enough, the naturalists tend to not have a problem with that in terms of the science. There is objective truth, but it's usually once you get into like ethics and things, it can get more tricky for them. But that concept is still there, that there's an objective nature to truth. So I could see how that would already be helpful enough for that topic of exclusivity.
Yeah. There's this idea, and I think ice cream's a good way to put it. If you think about, I go to Baskin and Robbins, you have all these flavors. Imagine you're over there looking at vanilla. I'm over here looking at chocolate peanut butter cup or something, right? And I say, no, you shouldn't have vanilla. If you eat vanilla, you're going to go to hell. But if you need to come over here to the one true flavor of religious ice cream, okay? People would look at you like you're crazy. but that's the idea they have in their mind. They're over there looking at atheism or looking at Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever. And I'm over here saying, no, you need this one true flavor of religious ice cream. It's like, it doesn't register because they're thinking about religious truth in the sense of ice cream and not insulin. Of course, if I went to the doctor and they said, Tim, you have type 1 juvenile diabetes, but they said, don't worry, we have a cure for you, or at least a medication to control it. Don't worry. And I said, well, I don't like needles. What else do you have? Like, can I use like Big Macs to control my diabetes? They're going to say, no, you don't get it, Tim. You'll die if you don't take this, right? So it doesn't matter if I believe it works or not. That doesn't affect it. It doesn't matter if I don't like it. Turns out, I have a 3-year-old nephew who has type 1 juvenile diabetes, and he would be dead right now if it wasn't for his insulin. Yeah. Okay? And that's the kind of claim we're making, an insulin claim, not an ice cream claim.
Yep. Lastly, doubt. People leave the church because it's not I don't want to use this terminology, safe space for doubt. It's true, though.
You're right, though. You're right.
Right. People do not feel comfortable asking questions that they're dealing with. And that is a problem. Plenty of folks have had the experience where they have a question they ask their youth pastor, and what does the youth pastor say? Oh, just read your Bible. Well, what if that's the very thing you're questioning? Why should you read it?
Yeah. So you're right. They don't feel like it's a safe environment for them to express their questions or their doubts. And many who do express the question and doubt get some kind of response like that. Or they're either ashamed. It's like, if you're a good Christian, you wouldn't ask this question. Okay. So shame is one response. Another response is silence. And so they ask the question and they basically don't get an answer in response. There was actually a study done. How much time do we have, by the way? Because I could talk about this in an hour.
We've got a few minutes here.
Okay. So there was a study done. It was a 3-year longitudinal study done by Fuller Youth Institute. Okay, and it was just published a few months ago in February. And what they found, and the headline of the article was interesting. It said something like, I can't quote it verbatim, but it said something like, the biggest hindrance to your kid's faith is not doubt, it's silence. And so the point was, and they did a study, and what they found was 70% or something of the kids, the high schoolers they asked this question to, they found that they all had doubts, 70%. And what they found was that it was those who did not get a response to their doubt, an answer at all. They were the ones who ended up walking away from their faith. It was the ones who didn't, the ones who explored their doubts instead of ignored their doubts. So that might be a good way to keep it. Don't ignore your doubts, explore your doubts. The ones who explored their doubts ended up strengthening their faith as a result. To me, that's amazing. So when I tell people, so I did a talk the other day where I titled it, Doubt Your Way Towards God. There's a sense in which you can keep asking these questions and it strengthens your faith, okay? And so we need to be very open to our kids raising their questions and their doubts. And parents, if you're listening, don't just wait for them to bring the question to you, okay? Because oftentimes there's all these questions that are inside that they haven't articulated. They maybe don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest is you raise the question, you raise the challenge. What I find is when I do an atheist role play, where I'll go into a church or a youth group or whatever, and I'll get introduced as an atheist, and I'll give all these arguments. I'll ask the kids, about their own doubts, and what they'll say is, I never even considered some of these questions, but when you raise them, it was like, yeah, I have that question, so it wasn't like on the tip of the tongue, but it was there kind of in the background. So the problem of evil, or one of these other kinds of challenges. So what we're trying to do is get them to raise the doubt, but then don't stop there, okay? Now try to doubt the doubt. And so let's find out, does this doubt actually hold up under tough scrutiny? Well, whatever the question may be, is it the problem of evil? Well, let's look at, is there any answers out there? And it turns out, especially to the logical problem, I mean, that's been solved philosophically, Is it more an emotional thing? Is it the hiddenness of God? Is it whatever it may be? Is there an answer to that question? And that's, of course, what we're here for. What we're doing is trying to provide those answers to assist parents so that they can respond to their kids.
That's sort of a great place to end up. Sort of summarizes the whole gist of the show today. So thanks, Tim, for going through these 6 issues, 6 reasons why folks are leaving the church. The study done by the Barna Group several years back now, but still important to talk about and to give us the tips and advice that you have on how we should broach the subject and prepare our kids for spiritual war, whether they are the ones themselves dealing with it, the issues, or they know someone who is, or what they might experience or be exposed to. They've got to be prepared. So very helpful. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hey, please stay in touch. Let me know. I know you posted that picture of Harwood's book. I'd love to get your thoughts on it more sometime, and certainly we'll bring you on the program again another day.
I'd love to come on again.
All right, thanks, Tim. God bless you.
Take care.
All right, well, that does it for our program today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a few bucks each month to help our program go and grow. I would love it if you would kindly consider supporting our program. Go to veracityhill.com, click on that patron tab, and be sure to give us a review on Facebook, iTunes, or your Google Play Store app, wherever you get the podcast and listen to the program. I'm grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors. And they are Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Fox Restoration. I want to thank our technical producer, Chris, for all the fine work that he does today. And I want to thank our guest, Tim Barnett of Stand to Reason. We'll be sure to put a link to his bio. You can check him out online. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.